Do not be afraid, little flock. Those are the words that began our gospel today. They are words that Jesus would speak at numerous times throughout his public ministry. Fear not, be not afraid. He would say it over and over again because he knew the one that had made the promise was trustworthy. That's why he kept saying it, so that we would believe it. Because fear really comes from the unknown, from worry, from anxiety about what the future holds. All of our fears are usually grounded in the future, and oftentimes they're informed from the past. And then in the moment of the present, we are filled with fear. I'm afraid of heights. I can just tell y'all that. I don't like climbing ladders. I cannot get up on roofs. I would definitely not get on this roof, but I am afraid of heights. And when I was in law school, one of my best friends in law school was a skydiver. He loved jumping out of planes. And he would talk about it all the time. His license plate even said skydiver on it. And one night, after we had been studying, he said, "You should go skydiving with me." And because I was so excited about all the law I'd learned, I said, "That would be great." And then like 2 Saturdays later, he calls, first thing in the morning, and I had not slept all night because all I could think about was, I can't go up in a plane and jump out of it. And so he called and I said, "Oh, I'm sick." And he was like, "Okay." Well, then I was watching some show on television and someone said, "You cannot let your fear control you." And I thought, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm allowing the fear to control my life. And so, the next time he called, I went. I went up in a plane. I stood at the edge of the door, and I plummeted towards the earth. Luckily, there was somebody who was much well-trained strapped to my back, but it was one of the most exhilarating, scary experiences of my life. But I had to trust. I had to trust my friend that he told me it was completely safe, and I had to trust the tandem guy who was attached to me that he knew what he was doing. And I didn't trust them completely. I was still filled with fear, but I am standing here before you because I landed softly on the ground and walked away. Would I do it again? Heck no. But I know that fear does not control my life. And it so often controls our lives. Because we're so afraid of making the wrong decision. We're so afraid of going somewhere where we're not sure what's going to happen. We're so afraid that it limits who we are and what our potential is. And that's why the story of Abraham is so amazing. It's why it is still told thousands of years later. It is why he is revered by Muslims and Jews and Christians alike. Is because his story is the most amazing story, truly, in all of Scripture. It's better than Jesus walking on the water. It's better than the Red Sea parting and Israel moving through it dry-shod. It's better than Noah and his ark. It's better than Jonah and the whale. It's better than all of the stories of Scripture. Because Abraham is the one who teaches us what faith looks like. You know, we hear those words all the time, have faith. You just got to have faith. Just have faith. We hear people say that to us. And so often, whenever we hear words that we are supposed to know the meaning of or what it looks like, we just nod along. I do that all the time because I'm from plain dealing, and there were some words we just never heard before. And so people will say things, and I'm like, uh-huh. I have no idea what they're talking about, but I'm going to pretend like I'm as smart as they are. And that's what we'll do. But whenever you want to know what faith looks like, then all we have to do is look at the story of Abraham. And it's so perfectly laid out in the letter to the Hebrews. Faith is the assurance of things hoped for and yet not seen. And there are important words in that one statement that starts off the story of Abraham as the writer of Hebrews relates it to us. It's the assurance. It's the knowledge that what we hope will come to pass will come to pass. The assurance of things hoped for and yet not seen. Even though we cannot see it, even though we cannot touch it, even though we cannot feel it, we are assured that what that thing is that lies ahead of us is true. And that's what's so amazing about the story of Abraham. God told him, God, who he really didn't know that well at the time, said, leave your homeland and go to a foreign country. And Abraham got up and did it. And we all know the story of how he kept promising him and Sarah year after year, generation after generation, that they would have a son and that their descendants would be as numerous as the stars in the sky and the sand on the shore of the sea. And yet they kept believing. And in the fullness of time, whenever they were finally granted that son in the person of Isaac, then God put him to the ultimate test. The assurance of things hoped for and yet not seen. He said, I want you to take your only son up to a high mountain, and I want you to sacrifice him to me. Well, I know what my reaction would be. You all know what your reaction would be. You would take your only son, and you would run in the opposite direction. You would think, this is not a God that I desire to serve. The assurance of things hoped for and yet not seen. He knew that God had made him a promise, and he knew that promise would be fulfilled. And so he set off on that journey, and he took Isaac all the way up to the top of that mountain, and he bound him and laid him down on that altar, and he raised that knife up, and he was ready to plunge it into his chest. And God sent his angel to stay his hand. Most of us would say, well, Abraham's crazy. But the reality, brothers and sisters, is that Abraham believed God. He trusted him completely and totally. And he knew that God would never ask him to do anything that would not work to his benefit. And so he trusted him. Because he found the one who made the promise to be trustworthy. And what we see in Scripture as we journey with Abraham all the way to the present age is that God continues to fulfill the promises. I love the line that the writer of the Book of Wisdom put in, usually attributed to King Solomon, is that they knew about the Passover before it was going to happen, because the one who made the promise was trustworthy. Because the promise had been passed down generation to generation. And we see this promise unfold. We see it unfold before our eyes as he leads them out of bondage into freedom. But when they got to the freedom, they didn't trust the promise anymore. And they all died in the wilderness. But he kept the promise to their descendants, who crossed over the river Jordan dry-shod into the promised land. And God kept making the promise, renewing the promise, keeping the promise, fulfilling the promise, until we finally reach the point of Jesus Christ. And there is no greater promise fulfilled than the person of Jesus Christ, who came into the world to redeem and save us, which was always the promise that God had made, that we would be reconciled to Him, that we would be welcome into the promised land of heaven, that we would be in relationship with Him for all eternity. And in the person of Jesus Christ, the culmination of that promise has come about. It is the fullness of that promise. And if we confess with our lips that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God raised Him from the dead, then we shall be saved. And what that means, brothers and sisters, is that we have faith. That we have faith that what we have been told, what we have heard, what we believe is true. That Jesus is God and that He did rise from the dead. I told you this at Easter, and I'll say it until I am dead. And hopefully I'm not being too severely punished because I've not been the best servant of my master. But we have to believe in the resurrection. And if we believe in the resurrection, brothers and sisters, then what else is there to fear? If we believe in the resurrection, there is nothing left for us to fear, because the promise has been fulfilled. But now, the last promise, the promise that He left us with. Number one, lo, I am with you always, even until the end of the ages, which we see fulfilled in the Eucharist. And if I am going to prepare a place for you, I will come back for you and take you to myself. That's the last promise. And that's the promise that Jesus was talking about in the gospel today. So the question that we have to ask ourselves is, do I have faith in the promises of God? And am I prepared for His return in glory? Am I prepared for the Master's return? If we heard the glorious trumpet sound right now, and He descended from heaven and set His foot down on Mount Olivet as He said He was going to, are you ready to meet Him? That's the question that each one of us has to ask in the deepest recesses of our hearts. There are days that I can say yes. It's usually right after I've gone to confession. Most days I would approach Him with fear and trembling. But here is the reality, brothers and sisters. You're about to meet Him. In a few moments, under the form of bread and wine, you're going to meet the Lord. And so the question you have to ask yourself is, am I ready? Am I a prepared servant? Or have I grown lax because of His delay in coming? And the only way that we can truly live this out, the only way that we can truly become the person that God is calling us to be, is by having faith. Is by having faith in the promises of God, believing that what God has promised will be fulfilled, believing that all that God has given us is real. Because ultimately that's what it comes down to. You can know every doctrine, dogma, teaching of the church. You can quote the catechism verbatim. You can pray your rosary daily and say a Divine Mercy chaplet every 3 hours. But if you don't have faith in the promises of God, if you don't have faith in Jesus Christ, then all of that is for nothing. So let us fear not, brothers and sisters. Let us recognize that the promises made by God to us are real and true. Let us no longer fear the future because God has already taken care of it. Let us put all of our faith and trust in Him, the assurance of things hoped for and yet not seen. That's who we're called to be. We're called to be like Abraham. But remember that one of the greatest saints in the church, St. Augustine, would always pray to God to increase his faith. And I really think that's who we are. We're a people of faith who are striving to be more faithful. And we just have to keep working and striving and trying and giving God a little bit more each and every day, trusting Him a little bit more each and every day, that His plan, that His will, that His desire should be the desire of our hearts. And the desire of God's heart is that every human being spends eternity with Him. That's the desire of God's heart. And our desire should be the same.